everyone. On behalf of Friday Waters, an initiative of the W4W Foundation, a think tank built as a citizens collective, we invite you to the session on walking the Ganga, along the Ganga. And just a brief about Friday Waters. It's a continuation of our signature series, Wednesdays for Water. The activities initiated on Fridays are Friday.Waters Talkies, Friday Reading Club, Water Thesis Club, and Water Arts. Each of these sessions will take place once a month, and the idea is to bring the water knowledge available in various alternate forms. Because on Wednesdays, we are really getting a lot of sessions on scientific side of it, and we are still having reservations for another 2-3 months. And this was one of the reasons why we thought that we will split it into Wednesdays and Fridays and bring the soft sessions on Fridays. And it's going great. And I'm very pleased to share with you that we have reservations now until October. So Fridays are also going to be on at least for some time. And thank you, all of you, for supporting and encouraging to really do this water conversations towards water conservation. We strongly believe that talking is important, and that's why we are doing this. The Friday sessions are actually aspiring for fun-filled and yet to be fruitful, to keep talking around water. Do keep following us at w4w.in for regular updates. And that is where you can also see some of our earlier sessions, and you will get more than 50 sessions recorded and live streamed, and you can get to understand how people think about water. We're really honored to have today's session with Siddharth Agarwal, a passionate nature lover, an IITian, a filmmaker, to talk about his journey and walking with the Ganga. And to do the honor, we have Dr. Rajkumari Sunita Devi as moderator, who is also an acclaimed water crusader herself. She's currently working as an additional CEO for a nationwide project on PMKSY watershed component of state level nodal agency for planning department Manipur for the watershed. So I will actually hand it over to Sunita to really take the session forward, and then I come back towards the end of the session. Thank you both, Sunita and Siddharth, and we are really looking forward to hearing from you. Over to you, Sunita.
Thank you, Bansi. It's really very exciting to have with us Siddharth Agarwal. His journey is, not like any other, but a very long and a giant leap, I can say. His journey of walking with Ganga. I take this opportunity for Friday Waters to welcome him, Siddharth. Siddharth lives in Kolkata. He is an aerospace engineering graduate from IIT Kharagpur, and his interest lies in storytelling, and which begin with his twin passion for cycling and photography. So Siddharth has been walking across India along rivers, trying to document and bring stories of marginalized people and environment into the mainstream. His organization, Beditam India Foundation, was some of his work along with efforts towards environmental research, documentation, and accountability initiatives. He is also a steering committee member of India Rivers Forum. He has contributed articles on Asia Sanctuary. I read some of his articles from, especially one named River Labs, celebrating a river's many forms. So he also has a blog, It Local, where he talks about his relationship with food. His article on while walking upstream along the Ganga from Ganga Sagar to Gangotri, the price of exclusivity, has been featured in the South Asia Network on Dams, Rivers, and People. So this is only some of the work which we are mentioning, but Siddharth has a lot of feather in his cape, and it is indeed a great honor, Siddharth, to have with us. So I'll just have give a very brief documentary about the film, which we are going to show today, Moving Upstream Ganga. So this is a river by Siddharth, which he walked 3,000 kilometers along the river Ganga in India. The documentary explores the idea of people walking, like idea of walking, people's response to a walking traveler in this modern era, and the involving relationship with the natural wonder. But Siddharth will do more justice in describing how he actually accomplished such a great achievement. So Siddharth, welcome to the discussion, and please tell us something about your the film. Yeah.
Right. Thanks, Sunita, and thanks, Mansi, for inviting me for this discussion. I'm very happy to be here, and this being the start of Fridays for Water, it's very exciting to be here. Like it's already been mentioned, I walked along the river Ganga. It took me about 6 months to walk, and about 3,000 kilometers that I had walked along the river. The walk had many intentions, and we had imagined many outputs from the walk. One of which was to make a documentary about the life of the people who live along the river, who are often not the central characters in the discussion around the Ganga or most rivers. At most, the discussions that we see are about people who live next to the river, but those who are close to highways, close to bridges, places which have easy access. So the idea was to go to places between these bridges, places which are not frequently visited, and get the response of riparian communities on what they think about the river, what they think about the changes that are happening in the river, as well as changes that are infrastructural and are happening with a top-down approach. What are their responses? What are their concerns? What are their thoughts about these happenings that everybody else gets to comment on, from bureaucrats to politicians to activists to civil society organizations? But what is the commentary that is running in the minds of riparian communities themselves is a key question with which we entered and started walking, entered this journey and started walking along the Ganga. With your permission, Sunita, I want to show a short trailer of the documentary that we made from this walk. Is that okay?
Please, please do.
All right. I'll just
That will be.
play the trailer for everyone.
अब तक कहाँ था तुम? हम गंगा जी की पैदल यात्रा कर रहे हैं। गंगा नदी जो है, उसकी पैदल यात्रा कर रहे हैं। पैदल। कलकत्ता से पैदल आ रहे हैं।
मेरा नाम सिद्धार्थ अग्रवाल है। मैं वैसे तो ट्रेन हूँ एज एन इंजीनियर, बट पिछले कुछ सालों से मैं इंडिया में नदियों के किनारे पैदल चल रहा हूँ। Walking has the capacity to disarm someone you're meeting, and that allows for a very fluid, very fluent conversation with whoever you're meeting, and all the layers of separation that we generally have on meeting someone new. Walking enabled the removal of all these layers and a very direct, intimate conversation in a very quick amount of time. इन नदी के किनारे पैदल चलते हुए जब दूसरे लोगों से मिले, चाहे वो लोग मछली पकड़ते हो, चाहे वो लोग खेती करते हो, चाहे वो लोग पूजा पाठ करते हो, चाहे वो लोग नाव चलाते हो, और भी जितने लोग नदी किनारे रहते हैं, उनसे मिलके ये चीज़ ज़रूर समझ में आई कि नदी का जो दायरा है या नदी की जो परिभाषा का दायरा है वो नदी की तरफ बहुत बड़ा है, वो किसी एक परिभाषा में सीमित नहीं है।
So Siddharth, like coming to you again, uh, what was the motivation of this film? Like, or was it focused on the water or the habitation on the riparian, as you said it, or the as a resource, water as a resource, or the environmental aspect? And we also see some clips of some religious activities, like the puja thing, because the word Ganga itself, the first thing that will strike us is the religion, like what is involved with the name. So, and in one of your article, I also came across a line you just describing, like during the walk you have been receiving, when you start walking, like free foods, and then a free welcome slip somewhere. But once you start reaching a religious side, then you started paying for food. So that was really striking, like religion and paying. Before that, before the religion thing, it was all free and welcoming and all. So what was the thing, like that motivated you in making the film?
Right. I think that's a lot of lot of questions. I'll try and slowly respond to those points. Starting from the motivation to do this journey and make the film. Like I mentioned earlier, one of the key motivations was to speak with riparian communities who are usually underrepresented. Like that was the most essential for us, that we speak with communities who are usually underrepresented and get their thoughts into the mainstream, get or work as an amplifier for them. That was one of the key ideas about doing this work. And the hope was that because we're making it in a format like a film, it might reach more people than say what a article would reach or what a academic paper would reach, so that we actually start to understand what does the riparian community actually think and want, instead of designing top-down policies and just pushing it on them. So that's one of the key motivations. But also the motivation was to look at the river in all these different places, look at the river and try and understand what's happening to the river. Of course, this is one transect looked at one point of time. Temporally, it's just one point of time at all these places on a transect. But in itself, it put together so much value for us in building our understanding of the river. And because we walked from the delta all the way to the source, we saw how the river was shrinking. I mean, it was not actually shrinking, but for us, usually when people walk along a river or travel along a river, it's from source to sink. So what happens is people see the river expanding. But when we went up, we kept seeing the river shrinking. And that made us think about what was making the river expand. That it was the tributaries that were making the river expand. And the river is nothing without its tributaries. So that was another very key learning that, came for us, or the motivation then to walk along the tributaries of the Ganga also sort of came from there. And all through the journey, the conversation around people's resources, whether that be food or water, or the access to these resources through agriculture, through groundwater, through the river, were key questions that we were constantly engaging in while walking along the river. And water is incredible it is fluid, but it also makes everything else fluid. It makes conversations fluid. It enabled us to have conversations with people we were just meeting, and just by sharing the water that they were drinking, enabled us to have that kind of fluid conversation. Unfortunately, people always don't always have access to clean water, and those again became points of conversation for us when meeting people on what the water quality was, what their source of water was. And these motivations, then some of it make it to the film, some of it have made it to articles that you've read, some of them have made it to new research papers that are coming out in collaboration with other young water enthusiasts from India, and even more work that we want to produce, which is slowly coming out. You mentioned like religion as some depiction in the teaser, as well as the example that you had quoted, that I had written in an article. It's interesting that there is so much religious connotation around the Ganga, which unfortunately has made it very easy for it to be commodified. Religion gave us the token for the river to get commodified, for it to be used as a commodity by different players to make take advantage of it and take advantage of others. Um, of course, I speak from a privileged point of view when I say that while on the walk, I thought, why don't I give it a try? I was anyways not spending a lot of money. People's generosity kept me alive. People's generosity kept me fed, gave me a place to stay. But I thought maybe let me try spending a week or two actively without spending any money. And because of how generous people are, I was going through that phase without spending money, um, until I reached a very significant religious spot along the Ganga. And that was the first day in a week that I had to spend money, because even to sit at the stairs of the temple, I wasn't allowed because I was not offering any money in the temple. So the commodification of land, of resources of a river via religion is something that, of course, it is powerful. It can move people. It does move people. It also brings together people. But this mindless capital related relationship with religion and faith has unfortunately not worked. Clearly not for the Ganga. We've been at it since 1980s with the first Ganga action plan, and we know the condition of the Ganga even today. So the religious relations have not helped the river, nor has it helped anybody else, as far as I can see.
That's really very striking, and like there is a. But again, I would like to ask you, like, was it worth it? Was the walking worth it? Like, when you come out the first day one of the walking, the first step, so you have full of, your whatever ambition, your objective, your goal, your mission, and the last day of your journey. So when you reach the destination, so was it worth it? Was it worth the, the pain or what you went through? So
Yeah. I mean, when I started, of course, I was full of energy and enthusiasm, and for doing something that is so physically challenging, the automatic thought is that one gets tired, one loses energy, but something very different happens. And that I've seen in most of my long distance self-powered journeys, and not just mine, others also who've done self-powered journeys, not motor-powered journeys. Your energy is actually get amplified when you meet more people, when your small targets are met, when you're seeing the fact that you are reaching places where there has not been an amplification of people's voices for a very long time. And then you see that, maybe you are doing something, maybe there is some value to it. And then you do it again, and then you do it again. And that day becomes a week, becomes a month. And it's just not tiring at all. Like, I have never felt tired. Of course, I felt exhausted, but every morning, there used to be an initial hiccup that I just have to walk again under the sun and walk through the day. But then within half an hour, that hesitation would dissipate, and I would very comfortably be able to do the day's journey, and somehow have enough energy by the end of the day to also have more conversations with people. So it was very enriching. And in terms of being worth it, I think absolutely. If for nothing else, just the fact that it has made me unlearn so much at a personal level. The ideas that I have learned as someone who's been brought up in a city, away from nature, because of the class position that I am in, suspicion of others, all of this really melted. I'm not saying I've become perfect, but it has really helped me unlearn a lot that probably I feel weird when I think that these are things that I believed in, or they're things that I thought to be true, or the fact that I should be suspicious of someone else just because they're different from me. I think a lot of this unlearning happened, and humility and generosity. The amount of generosity that I've received is unparalleled. So I would just do it for the generosity of it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even like hearing from you humbled us, like as if we are part of the thing. And so I can understand like how humbling you must have felt. So that's really great. So Mansi, you want to?
Thank you for getting me in. Siddharth, I am full of questions and queries and whatnot. Because I do these little walks. I'm not so brave as you, but I do conduct lake walks on a regular basis with the community. But I do relate with you when you really made a beautiful line saying that water is fluid, and when you're walking, the conversation also gets fluid, and that's a very important tool which change makers can use, if they wish to. And you do talk about the top-down approach, and I do have questions on the 31,000 crore Namami Gange project. But then because your focus was on understanding lives of people, understanding the river, I will put my questions around those. And I'm really curious to understand, particularly because you were eating, sleeping with the local people and really conversing with them and all. How do they relate with this whole magnanimity of the project? I'm sure everyone living on the banks, they are aware that Namami Ganga is going on. So how do people relate on the ground, and do they talk about it, or they are still engrossed, obviously, with their everyday life and water challenges they face? But I'm sure at somewhere in their mind, they must be relating it with what's going on at that. I mean, are you seeing any convergence from the bottom where you were, and we know what is the policy and the project? What was your experience?
Right, right. I think that's a fabulous question.
Can we have more questions so that Siddhartha will find it convenient to club the questions together?
I think, Amar sir, you are great. That's why you are our leader. Please go ahead.
No.
No,
Like,
I think it's a very good idea. Please go ahead.
Siddharth, my background is economics, but not the mathematical economics, but I'm a social economics person. When you made a statement that commodification of the river Ganga has not helped the people nor the river. And there's a paradox. And I'm not questioning your conclusion, but something which I would like to understand. When something gets commodified, it demands a value. When something demands a value, why should it get deteriorated? Number one. And the other questions I would like to know from you, well, such a long distance interacting with people along the entire stretch, I'm not trying to be ethnic based or things like that, but definitely you have come across different ethnic groups across the stretch. And what I would like to know from you, what has been the differential relationships across the ethnic communities, or the relationship between river and the people have remained more or less homogeneous in the entire stretch. And that may enable us to understand something like what are the areas, if there is any differentiation. If there is no differentiation, no problem. If there is a differentiation in the relationship between the river and the different ethnic groups, we may find something, thereby we may be looking for policy interventions to correct any weaknesses, whatever, because you are the one who have done it. So we really want to know. We really want to know about that. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Those are very interesting, even provocations to think about. I'll start with what Mansi had asked, and then come into the question that you asked. You know, in terms of people relating with, say, Ganga Action Plan or Namami Gange, whatever has been going on from a top-down perspective over the years, there are two things largely I would try to touch upon. One is that people definitely feel much more distant from the river than they used to earlier. I've heard multiple people along the river say that earlier when they used to feel sick, they used to come to the river to take a bath and they would feel better. Today, they go and take a bath in the river and they feel sick. So people's relationship with something that is so powerful for them, so important for them, has flipped in terms of that kind of a value. It might have earlier been just something in their minds. It might have just been psychological effect, but it has turned into a physiological effect for them, which is making them sick, and which says a lot about how their relationship with the river will evolve over time now because of what we've done with the river. The other thing regarding the top down and bottom up, I think the biggest gap, and people see this also, and they will talk about it sarcastically often, that we know in figures that the pollution load in the Ganga is largely because of urban centers. But if you see action, government action, lots of civil society action, it's very easy to go and single out villagers. In a feudal system that we have, where people's mindset is a feudal, it's feudal, it's very easy to go and tell a villager, do this or do that. It's very easy to tell them you are the culprit, whereas they are not the biggest contributors to the pollution in the river. And that is the chasm I see in how we implement these policies, which is top down, and people's relationship with the river, where you're telling villagers that you are defecating on the banks of the river and that is why the river is polluted, whereas 80% of the pollution load on the Ganga is urban sewage. There's a huge disconnect, and easy fruits that we are picking up, low-hanging fruits, where we are saying we'll make all the villages along the Ganga organic, and we'll have all villages open defecation free which are along the Ganga. I mean, first of all, it's myopic because the Ganga itself is made up of all of its tributaries. So you have to work on all of the tributaries. You have to work on the whole basin. That is when the Ganga itself will get clean. But the easiest people to pin all the blame on is the people who live right next to a river. So that kind of a gap really exists, and people are really fed up of it. Very recently, a group spent time along the river, and they spent time in villages telling kids how to live with the river. For God's sake, those are people who have lived for generations along the river, and we are going there and telling them from our urban perspective that this and this is how you should live with the river. This is why the river is important. Those people don't need to be told that the river is important. They know the river is important. It's important in their lives. And these things used to come up in discussions with people. And this also leads me to your first question, sir, where you asked about commodification and the extraction of value. There is extraction of value happening, but the question is, who is it happening for? That the Maneri Dam exists on the Ganga to quench Delhi's thirst. That is what is taking away the water from the Ganga and not leaving any flow in the river. The price is being paid by someone else. As a commodity, the value generation and consumption is still happening. When cities take out water from the river and put sewage back, so value is being extracted. The unequal distribution of gain to this value is, I think, where we should be looking at in sort of answering your question about commodification and the generation of value and the consumption of it. So the price is being paid by folks who are actually not using that value, is how I sort of want to answer your question about the concept of value. In terms of ethnic groups who are living along the river, because of the fertility of the land, you largely see landowning upper caste communities who have occupied most of the land. because we've completely razed all forests along the river Ganga and mostly in the Ganga basin, which have fertile soil to grow crops. So it's largely that, but of course, all our villages are a mix of different communities, caste-wise distribution is different. So if I had to talk about different communities on the river, I would largely talk about fishing communities and agricultural communities in non-urban areas. And there is definitely a difference between their relationship with the river, because a fishing community, even downstream of a polluting location like Kanpur, still goes into the river every day, still dives into the river every day to catch fish. Even I went and caught fish with them, but I didn't dare step into that water because I was very afraid, because that was downstream of Kanpur, and it's the evening before I could actually see layers of oil on the river. So people unfortunately don't have any option but to continue their daily lives in the way they're related to the river. But there's definitely this distinction on how agricultural communities in some areas are lifting water out of the river through pumps. Of course, the groundwater relation of people with the river continues, though not so well understood or not discussed. Fishing communities and how they interact with the rivers, and the interaction between fishing communities and farmers, because often landless farmers wait for monsoon waters to recede to start farming on floodplains. So I've fortunately been in locations where I've seen fishing groups come to the village and tell people who are landless that this and this is where the river has receded, and this is where it looks like there's fertile land, so you can possibly try and go and sow your seeds there. So that was incredible to see that kind of a relation between different communities.
May I continue with my questions, Sunita? Okay, we are on mute.
Yeah, please, Mansi.
Yeah. So, Siddharth, I will take it from where Professor Amar was talking about the ethnic community. And I want to go into the little bit of discussion on the communal aspect of it, because we say Ma Ganga, right? And everything is around Ma Ganga and all. So I'm just curious to learn from you, because we have so many religion followed in the country, and Ganga being such a long river, you may have come across many people who follow other religion. How do they address Ma Ganga? How do they see Ma Ganga, and what kind of prayers and rituals you have experienced? Because it is not a river for the Hindus, and I will be standing against if somebody says that, for sure. So I'm just curious to learn your experience about it.
Right. The areas that I walked through largely had Hindu populations, Muslim populations, tribal populations, and unfortunately, the tribal populations are limited in terms of access and representation. Of course, there are lots of Hindu rituals that happen along the river, and I was not able to look at rituals that other religions perform. But I do know that even Buddhists have reverence for flowing water. It doesn't, like, the word Ganga, for example, means that which flows. That's the meaning of the word. That which flows then becomes representative of that which flows in all rivers, in all religions. It might be Hinduism, it might be Islam, it might be tribal animistic religions, or Buddhism, or Sikhism. And irrespective of religion, it was very easy or very clear to see that all people who live on the banks have a reverence for the river as something that is a giver. That was irrespective of what caste, class, or community one belonged to. But the reverence of the river as a giver is something that was constant across the states, across religion and caste lines. For some, desperately so, because they didn't have anything else. But for others, as a matter of faith, as something that they've understood. And yet for others who did not share that faith, but had that shared feeling for others who live with them. So it was like a whole mix of how people relate to the river, and some just respect it because their friends respect it or their friends revere it. So that kind of relationship is very beautiful to see.
So water at a background and these cultural, associations with it. But you also talk about the true meaning of Ganga, a river which flows. You also do talk about, these are scientific things, along with the cultural and spiritual angle of Ma Ganga, I must say, or all rivers in the country for that matter. You are walking other rivers as well. You do talk about also the relevance of the tributaries, and I mean, as a simple science or a simple math of water system, we do understand that small drains are going to feed to the small rivers or tributaries are going to feed to the big rivers, and so on and so forth. And small drains and rivers are fed by the lakes and the ponds, so there's a whole water system which is in place. And when we talk about Aviral Nirmal Ganga, we are already talking about let the water flow, which is in a way, a step towards let the water be clean, because unless it is flowing, it cannot be clean. So it's this symbiotic relationship between the Aviral Nirmal Ganga, but all other river as well. Having said that, and that word, these two words have been very nicely used in all the initiatives of Ganga, So I'm just curious to understand from you, when we look at the other tributaries, and if we look at the way policy distribution or the funding distribution in the policy is working around, personally, I have failed to see those angles. But then, because you are walking on the ground, did you see that really there is a lot of work going on the ground in rejuvenating the tributaries, rejuvenating the lakes and ponds, so that Ma Ganga can be rejuvenated? Because from distant, it feels all the money is poured in the Ganga itself, whereas the health of Ganga depends on these little, sons and daughters and, of Ganga. So
Right.
over to you. I think I will rest my questions after this, and then Sunita may take it for other participants. So this is my last question. If
Right.
you do not really want to answer more, but I have more questions for you.
Okay.
I will stop
So
here, but yes, I will stop after this question.
Right. I'll pick up two things that you've put forward. One is tributaries, and say I walking along tributaries or us studying tributaries, and the other about this idea of Aviral, Nirmal, Ganga, and the idea of tributaries and what are we doing. I'll answer the second one first. When it's very recently I was just actually, when you were talking, I was trying to quickly find out one photograph. I couldn't. Where I wanted to show the first dam on the Ganga, when you start from the source, is the Maneri Dam, Maneri 1.
Yes, yes.
If you go to the Maneri Dam today, the Aviral Ganga, which is the continuous, unfettered flow of the river, is barely a trickle. For about 150 meters, 200 meters, the river is bone dry, and the complete river is channeled through a tunnel to a power generating station. That is the condition of the river, and it happens multiple times in the quote unquote run of the river projects, which are supposed to not hurt the ecology of the river, but we end up diverting all the water that is available in the river, along with its nutrients, aquatic life, everything, through these tunnels to power stations. So at least on ground, the ideas of Aviral and Nirmal Ganga sound like a farce. And our disconnect to it is very real, because one of the most popular places where people go and experience the Ganga, or they think they are experiencing the Ganga, is Haridwar.
Yes.
But at Haridwar and Har Ki Pauri, when people are actually dipping in what they think is the Ganga, but it's actually a Upper Ganga Canal. The main river there is dry. It's absolutely dry. If religion had some role to play, I would say take the religion back to the river and force the flow of the Ganga to return to the main body of the river so that that flow can continue. I think that is when religion can play a powerful sort of
Can be tool.
role, but it does not, because unfortunately it's been controlled by a few for the benefits of themselves, those around them. The second thing I'll quickly talk about in terms of tributaries, also speaking to the idea of feeding into the main river, groundwater, lakes, ponds, rainfall, forests, all contributing to drain, becoming small rivers and big rivers. India has more than 1,000 dams and barrages on the tributaries of the river Ganga, including the Ganga, and many, many more are planned. Because our urban thinking is so centered around water as a resource only, and only as a resource for us, we are okay with these dams in these distinct locations where water resources being tapped and brought over long distances for city town usage. Even after the 2013 floods, the Ravi Chopra committee had put forward suggestions of stopping dams in the Ganga basin in the Indian Himalayas. Very recently, the government has actually put forward ideas of actually rebuilding those dams and damming the tributaries of the Ganga, which we know is going to directly affect the health of the Ganga. So the propaganda is powerful, but the plan and the propaganda both are myopic, both in their vision and action, is how I see it. I mean, I've been walking along tributaries of the Ganga, or tributaries or off tributaries of the Ganga. I've spent time walking along the Ken. I've recently started walking along the Mahakali in Uttarakhand. And as part of a fellowship program that I run at my organization called Moving Upstream Fellowship, 14 fellows have spent months walking along rivers Betwa and Sindh. And we've slowly started to understand what's happening with the tributaries, because like we discussed, the tributaries are what define the main river also. So it's unfortunately been not a good picture of what we're seeing with the tributaries as well, where small tributaries, which are just 500 kilometers long, have 5 dams on it, 6 dams on them, and plans of making humongous dams, making large water transfers like the Ken-Betwa River Linking Project, which is planned inside a national park. So it does not inspire any confidence in me about the plans that are being put into place. But I guess that if we can create enough momentum and use the right tools, we may be able to turn the levers and work for the betterment of our rivers. Yeah.
Very well said. I think it is also resonates with the very idea of decentralizing or empowering not only water bodies but also the people who live along the water bodies. Because the more centralized approach to large infrastructures, the more actually problems are seen at the grassroots or ground level. So I mean, I have been strongly linking governance with the way water systems are, and we can very clearly see a relationship. So I will stop here, and thank you so much. And over to you, Sunita. You may open the floor to other participants. Yeah. You are on mute.
Yeah. So you just mentioned about your experience with working, I mean, even in the Ken River and Betwa. So the Ken Betwa project, which is a very ambitious, which I feel is a very, very ambitious plan of the government. So you have any idea, like, have you ever, get a chance to go through the DPR or?
The government really wants it to happen. There is no question about it. In fact, last year's budget even had an allocation of over 1,000 crore rupees towards this project. This is at the time when the project does not have all requisite clearances. The Central Empowered Committee of the Supreme Court has submitted its report to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court judgment is also still not out. The data on the basis of which this proposal is proposed is not in the public domain. What justifies the project is not in the public domain. It's just something that we are supposed to believe as citizens of the country. And unfortunately, the project documents also don't inspire any confidence. For example, I think on page 65 of the DPR, it says something about cheetahs in Panna National Park, which is weird because we know that cheetahs have not been seen in India since the 1960s. And this is a DPR that was made much after that. And not just that, there are many more errors just in the basic DPR. So we need fresh independent assessments to happen. We need the data for this to be in the public domain, because this whole project is such an eyewash when in the public domain it's talked about as benefit for Bundelkhand, drinking water for millions, and agricultural sort of benefits. If you go to the DPR, you read the first page of the DPR of the Ken-Betwa linking project, and it will tell you that the project is aimed to transfer waters to Raisen and Vidisha towns, which are urban areas where the water is supposed to be transferred. So it's a water transfer project. And I'm thankful for people like Himanshu Thakkar who helped us understand this, helped us unravel these things, and really make it clear that these projects, again, on the backs of the names of agrarian communities, rural communities, are actually being made to benefit urban communities. So I think that actually people from Raisen and Vidisha should say that we don't want this, that we will conserve our own rainwater and we will make water resources available locally. And this destructive project that's going to submerge 23 lakh trees and more inside Panna Tiger Reserve will submerge the critical tiger habitat. We don't want that to happen. So the people of Raisen and Vidisha should say, we don't want this. We'll find alternative ways. But I think that's my expectation of a very advanced democracy. I have my hopes. Please don't get me wrong. I have my hopes that people have the capacity and the willingness to do this. I think the mobilization and the vision, collective vision, I think is still absent. Yeah. I definitely hope this project doesn't happen, but the government seems to be hell-bent on making it happen.
That's news to us again, because like we thought like it's not happening. So anyways, Siddharth, I would like we are talking about the river or the Ganga, but coming a little away from, I would like to ask you about your Veditam, the Moving Upstream Fellowship. Is the fellowship open to all or to particular group of people or students, or how is it about, like,
Thanks for asking for that. So I started the fellowship program because the idea was that all this documentation or these ideas of what's happening on ground should not come just from my lens, not just my bias. And we wanted different people to go and look at rivers in different places and create their own documentation and bring it in front of us. And we've been successful in doing that. We've had like 4 iterations of the fellowship already. And I hope to start another iteration in the second half of this year. It's almost time for that, which is open for people who can speak the language where the river is. So that is our key criteria, that whoever can speak the local language is someone who is eligible to go and go on this fellowship, create their own documentation. If you just give me one opportunity, I'd like to show you a couple of things that have come out of the fellowship program. This is a book that a couple of our fellows have written. It's a photo book based upon their walk along the river Betwa. This is just a quick preview of the notebook of one of our fellows, Kabini, who's an artist and who's documented the river in her own ways. We've created some interactive zines that we are going to be publishing soon, where people who may not otherwise hear about rivers, but might through these zines and these graphics, for example, or through this photo book, or through bird lists, or through journalistic stories, get engaged with the river. And this is just a view of the river first fellowship that we had done of the Betwa. And this is the river Ken that we had also walked. So we're hoping that over time we can walk many more tributaries, many more people can walk these tributaries and bring forth these perspectives, and also create connections with the riparian communities who can then start to voice their own thoughts and ideas, which is very crucial, that it's not just us who's talking, it's them, riparian communities themselves having the platform to put their voice forward.
So, and so what does this fellowship offer? Like, is it a scholarship or?
So as part of the fellowship program, what we do is we provide travel expenses, we provide basic field expenses, as well as a stipend to the fellows in terms of resources. But we also provide mentorship on how to actually go and spend time walking along the river, how to engage with communities, be respectful, what are the things that we have to look at when we are walking along the river. And we also work with our fellows to publish their work in popular media, in different formats. We put in resources to publish it independently. We also connect them, and the outputs have been incredible to see on what just a little bit of push from our side can help people do.
Okay, please, Mansi. I think Megha has a question. Like,
yes, Megha has a question, and Vishal too has a question. So maybe Vishal, you may go first. I saw your hand raised. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So thank you for all the insights. So in your, when you talk to people, do you gather the impression that men and women have a different relationship with the river? Like, do men talk about the river in ways differently than do women? One. And secondly, do people talk about a changing climate, and how do they perceive it'll affect, the river?
Right. Thanks. Those are very interesting questions, especially the first one about gender, because as a man, I have very limited access to women because of patriarchy, because of how patriarchal the system is. Over time, I've learned to sort of navigate that, get better at it, but still the layer remains. And this is my pitch to anybody who doesn't think there's inequality, that you are missing half the world because there is patriarchy. So that's our way to that's our reason to break it down. But people definitely have such distinct relationships with the river based on gender in terms of access. So I've seen women having more access along smaller rivers than popular rivers because it's more crowded, there are more people around. So areas where people don't go, like outsiders don't go, women have a much more freer time interacting with the river as opposed to more popular rivers. Even within a village, no matter where it is, because of how responsibilities are divided, there is a distinct relationship with the river. Because the burden of carrying on tradition and religion is upon women, the rituals have to be performed by the women, hence strengthening their relationship with the river, but for very different and weird reasons. So there's a very clear distinction. In terms of change in climate, there is definitely a realization that things are not the same, or the predictability has vanished for sure. And that definitely affects their plans of how to or when to till the land, when to sow their seeds. It definitely affects that. I think it might have also been my shortcoming in investigating this idea deeper on what they think will happen to the river. But I have definitely asked questions around what people think infrastructural interventions will do to the river, whether that be the waterways project or large dam projects. And there people definitely have a vision, which is interesting because those projects or those interventions is actually what is climate change, is what is causing climate change. It's a long loop, but eventually those are things that are actually the causes for like reasons for climate change in the first place. People do have that connection, like people do have the time to think about it and have their own theories. They may not have the same vocabulary as us, but they definitely are thinking about it like very strongly.
Thank you.
I think that's a good time to also ask this question, which Megha is asking. She is unable to speak on this, but she's just left a message for me. If you were contacted by any government officer along this journey, and I'm sure you met also some of them, or people got in touch with you on this big project which you are, because you are also quite, getting known about this work which you were doing along with it, because of the publications and works and amplifying, as you rightly mentioned in the beginning, that you kind of try to become voice of the people on the ground. So and we are talking about these projects and all. So what were these government officers and people also when they link it with projects and also link it other
Right.
things? What
Right.
were their reaction? Why are you walking? And some experience, please.
Right. Just one quick correction. I mean, I don't want to be the voice of the people. I just want to be an amplifier or a
Yeah.
platform. People have their own voice. I am
Yes.
not the
Sorry.
voice of the people. So that's definitely like very, I
Little,
try
yeah.
very difficult because of how we've been brought up in cities. But I
Yes.
try that is what the distinction should be. In terms of interaction, it's very interesting that no government officials have ever reached out to me. That, oh, you've done this. What are your readings of this, or what is your understanding? Also, because when I did my work, I purposefully did not go to any officials. My objective was to have a people's record or a people's understanding of the river, because officials have endless number of platforms to voice themselves. So I didn't need to feel the need to give them another platform. Interestingly, there have been a few places where I have encountered officials, including one place near Hastinapur Wildlife Sanctuary, when I went and spoke to the DFO and said, "Can I walk through the sanctuary, because I thought it's a protected area, so I must ask." And I was said, "No, you can't walk from this area," which was very weird because it's such a heavily populated area. I was actually not like, I was honest enough to go and ask, but I think next time I'll go, I just won't ask. So that's unfortunate, because it could have been a good experience of walking through that area. But I didn't after they had said no. At least for that period, I said I won't walk through that area. But it was very unusual and weird for them to say that don't walk along the river.
If you had just walked, nobody would have even noticed you.
Absolutely no.
Mm.
And that's the power of walking as well. You can,
Yes.
people don't assume anything. People just come up to you and ask the most ridiculous questions. And I used to get very like, initially I was feeling very weird about it. And then after one point I realized that this is actually a success of the method, that people are
Yes.
feeling comfortable enough to come up to someone and say anything they want. Whereas if you go
Yes.
somewhere with motorized vehicle, the dynamics between people is very different.
Absolutely. Yeah, you also put it very nicely in the beginning, that when you are walking, you are almost with them. Yeah. So I think we move further. Anuja has a question. Anuja, unmute yourself.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, thank you for the wonderful conversation, Siddharth. I had two questions, part of which you answered already. Ki, when you were walking, did you feel like an outsider or one of them? And you sort of answered that. And second question is, now that you've walked and completed this journey, what would you like to kind of share as tips or advice for people who would like to take up a similar journey? Some do's and don'ts, or kind of be wary of sort of things. Thank you.
Thanks. Those are great questions. I'll start off with the first one, that no matter how hard I tried to be a local, I was always an outsider. So I think the dropping of the pretense for me was, I think, key to really placing myself how I was. And then everything flowed from that I am an outsider. I mean, there's no way I can change that. I am an outsider. And then how do we work with that? And I think it's also important for, say, for example, me, when I'm doing this, to say that I'm an outsider, that the other person should have the full knowledge of why I am there. So I feel that kind of accountability to whoever I'm meeting. And that also flows to the second question on the do's and don'ts. That one is like, this is where it really starts, consent. Because often when we go from cities to urban areas, or even in cities to rural areas, and often within cities also into slums, we feel so entitled to take pictures of everyone, post it online, use it for our own purposes, not be respectful, don't ask for permissions for anything. I think that's the biggest do and don't that I say to even our fellows who go out, that you do not do anything without someone's consent. Don't record them, don't take their picture, ask them. If they say no, respect them. And respect is where the whole cycle, begins, that we respect people for who they are. We respect their lived experiences. We respect whatever their opinion is. We are not there to, especially if you're on a journey to record, I am not there to preach or teach. These are very important. It's so easy to get into that savior complex, slip into that savior complex, and be, that, oh, I know better than you. I absolutely have no idea what I'm talking about often. And communities do, who live, people who live next to the river or anywhere. I can't match their lived experience. I've been guilty of this. Like, I've not been perfect from day one. I've been guilty of doing many of these things. I'm trying to improve myself. I see myself slipping still, but hopefully this is useful. And any other do's would just be to be mindful of where you are, to be mindful that you're not a burden on someone else, especially people who have little and who give so much. In terms of documentation and physical stress, we are not creating records. We are trying to record something. We are trying to be part of a conversation. So don't make the walking and the physical part of it the center of everything. It's just a method, it's a tool. So to anybody who's wanting to do something like this, give yourself some practice, give yourself some leeway. It's okay to fail. I had to stop my journey multiple times because of injuries. These are okay. Like, nobody's judging us for that, but judging us for what we are doing and how we are talking to people. And in terms of physical exertion and walking, that walking many kilometers a day has nothing to do with what we are talking about today. Like, it's irrelevant. If I had to walk the Ganga again, instead of 6 months, I want to take 12 months to walk the same distance, or 1.5 years. I don't want to do it again in 6 months or 4 months or 3 months. That serves no purpose except feed my ego. So yeah, those are some do's and don'ts, quick do's and don'ts that I can think of. I hope that answered the question.
Thank you so much. That was very, very lovely answer. Really from heartfelt. Thank you.
Thank you.
The beauty of Siddharth's response to Anuja's question on do's and don'ts, I was listening to that carefully, and that's wonderful. You didn't disclose the whole thing. You just inspire others to start their own journey and explore themselves. You have answered to that along those lines. That's wonderful. And my biggest take from your presentation, Siddharth, is that, well, we're still in the same world where the government cares a hoot. Cares a hoot in the sense that, well, when people, you said that the entire population along the streets hold the river with reverence. They do respect the river. But we have so far not thought of designing any kind of intervention based on that reverence. Rather, we are not acknowledging the fact that the damages are being done by the well-placed urban population, and we have not even thought of proper urban planning on these lines. So that is where we come across this kind of scenario in every development intervention in India. I want this, I want a road, so finish, kill the mountain, cut the trees, and you have the road. So at the end of the day, you have neither the roads nor the original natural position. You don't have anything. That is how we end up. And that is exactly, I'm taking much interest in what you said, because we are planning a big international project on how to relate our behavior with the water system. While making policies for, we don't have a policy for water. We don't even recognize the fact that Ganga has a life of its own. We still don't recognize that. And similarly, every river has a life of its own. We don't recognize that. We only want to utilize in the absolutely negative side, rather to exploit. We only want to exploit the river for the contemporary period. We are not thinking of the future. And that is actually where we need to frame river policies or water policies by recognizing the fact that water has a life of its own. A river has a life of its own. And here, we need to connect the culture of reverence to the water. We have to frame policies based on that, not how I want to use the water. No, that's not it. That's wonderful, wonderful listening to you.
Thank you, sir.
So Mansi, I think we're a little over time, but really interesting question. Like, we don't know like how time passed. Siddharth, like, it's really wonderful talking to you and hearing a very different concept of, like a walk, but what an experience you had. So I think that comes to the end of our discussion today, but we hope that we still have contact with you and communicate with you for a further, any discussion or any project planning, because the journey we are taking, like the Women in Waters. So we just call it Women in Water, wherein we are, like trying to set some example for other women, because it is only the women who worries about water. But it's not a gender bias thing where only women taking over. We have grateful great people like you, then Professor Amar, like, who has also been my mentor. And so Siddharth, we wish you all the best in your future endeavor. And so Mansi, please do the closing.
Thank you so much, Sunita.
Quickly
Go
say
ahead,
one-
Siddharth. Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks for those comments. I just want to say that it is only a woman who would apologize for it. Men are just too egoistic to apologize for it.
No, that also brings a very important point on the relationship, and Vishal was already asking the way we look at water, And so people like Sunita, me, Anuja, Megha, we are all trying to work on the leadership side of it. And you already gave us a word called amplifying. There are a lot of wonderful women who are working around it. We are not gender biased, but we are trying to do our little bit to bring the voice of the women in the water sector through our initiatives and all. And Friday Waters itself is one of the initiatives. More women in the group, but of course, we also have others as well. Talking to you, Siddharth, I was just thinking that while you were on this journey to understand the river and the people, I'm sure you understood yourself much better than 6 months before and 6 months hence. And I think that's where we can also learn right from the time of Vedas and how things were written in our own culture, that why it is important to really do introspection, and when you are doing introspection, it does not mean that you just become not the today's narcissist way of looking within, I mean, it's more about looking more outside and, opening up yourself to more people. And I do feel aware, because I am following you closely since I have come to know about your work, that you have become a river by walking along the river for all these years, so I don't see you now Siddharth anymore. You are a river now. So
That's such a
we'll
kind
have,
thing to say.
So it's really, really very inspiring to hear such endeavors. I know how difficult it is to bring people to walk a little lake, with covering more than 50 lake walks so far, and it has been extremely difficult, but I do understand how encouraging it must be for you when you were really not looking to walk people, but you were walking to the people. You know, that's a huge difference in that. And I do hope that a lot of people really take this approach to understand nature, understand people, to be more emphatic. In fact, we should arrange walks for all government officers. I mean, if Amar sir gives us blessings, we can start walking all the government officers, you know. We have that motivation. At least 4 of us are here who are highly motivated people. We just need some seniors to guide us. And we reach out to government officers and say, hey, let's walk with us, you know, anywhere, small tributary 2 kilometers, please walk with us and at least feel the water body. So I think really, really great experience and a very flowing conversation today. So thank you, Sunita, for taking us through the conversation, for as a wonderful moderator you have been, and for again another flowing person. And thank you, Siddharth, once again. It's time for me to announce the next Friday session. We have another wonderful session. We have book reading session next Friday, 12th of August. And we have Professor Jinia Mukherjee. So Siddharth, we have Professor Jinia Mukherjee to talk about blue infrastructure, a very technical book, but we are trying to really bring it to you in a very layperson language. And Jinia, we all know, is a wonderful speaker. So we are very excited to have you next Friday. Thank you for your support and encouragement. Do keep watching us on Wednesdays, Mondays, as well as Fridays. So we are trying to do more water conversations towards water conservation. So please take care of yourself, and see you next Friday, next Monday, next Wednesday. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.